This meeting is for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Chad P. will be sharing on steps 6 and 7 for 50 minutes. Chad, thank you so much for your service and for coming back for the second time to share your life with us. You're so appreciated. At this time, please help me give a warm welcome to Chad from Ocean Grove, New Jersey. His home group is Primary Purpose Group Austin. Welcome, Chad, and over to you.
Thanks, Natasha. Hi, everybody. My name is Chad Payne. I'm an alcoholic. Let's get this view fixed so I don't have to look at my gorgeous face. There we go. Okay. Been sober since April the 2nd of 2003. I'm sure grateful for that. And my home group is the Primary Purpose Group online. I've got an in-person home group and an online home group. And Primary Purpose Group, we study the big book line by line, very slowly, and we try to leave our experience out of our share as much as possible and really focus our discussion on the text. We don't have a problem with sharing your experience in AA. We believe it's the lifeblood of AA. It's just one meeting where we really try to make it a true book study. So that's what we do. And I'd like to invite everybody. The information's already in the chat, so I don't have to say I'm going to do it and then not do it like I usually do. So it's in there, and I recommend that everybody check it out at least once. It's a little bit different. Anyway, Tamara, thank you for asking me to do this again, and thank you to all you guys who worked to put on this meeting. It's a special meeting, and it's an honor to get to speak here. And I didn't realize it until just a little while ago that this is my second time to come here. And coming from a guy who wasn't welcome in a lot of places, to be asked to speak, there's still a little part of me deep down in here somewhere that thinks I don't deserve to be anywhere. It's not near as powerful as it was in the past, but it's still in there. So for me to get invited to come speak is a big deal. And then to get invited back is really special. So thank you for having me here. And I see some of the speakers that you guys have. So you guys are used to having some really good speakers. So it's a big honor for me. Okay, I'm going to talk just a little bit about me, and then I want to get into to these steps quickly because I'm relatively new at talking about steps 6 and 7, and I'm really enjoying it. I like these steps a lot, and they mean a lot more to me today than they did certainly in early sobriety. It seems like it's taken a long time to kind of start to grasp these steps. And that doesn't necessarily mean they haven't worked in my life, but it's taken a long time to kind of to get an understanding of what it is that's going on. And that's the way a lot of these steps are for me. But I just to tell you a little bit about me, I grew up in a family with alcoholism, but I was loved. I certainly don't look at my childhood as the problem by any means, though it was a loving but dysfunctional family. And the best way that I can describe that to you is out of 6 of us, today, 5 out of 6 either are currently or at some time in the past have been members of 12-step fellowships. And that's all cool now, when we're sitting around the table talking about recovery. But getting to that point was, let's just say, it was adventurous. That's the kind of family that I come from. There's a lot of divorce, a lot of, like, if you ask me how many brothers and sisters I have, that's not a straightforward question. That's going to require some thought because I don't really know who counts and who doesn't count. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the family I came up in. There was a lot of drinking and a lot of partying and a lot of chaos and some fighting there toward the end and some difficult times. But I was doing pretty good as a kid. And then what I know today, I didn't know then, is that spiritual malady started to hit me right around 6th, 7th grade. And I started to get real uncomfortable. I started to feel like I didn't fit in, like I wasn't a part of, like I wasn't good enough. And I was wishing that I was like this or like that. And the best way I can describe it is it's kind of like if someone was following me around all the time saying, God, Chad, I wish you were like so-and-so, or I wish you were more like this, or you don't belong here, or they really don't like you. And, and they're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you. And they're talking behind your back. And, just that all the time was going through my head. And it really started to wear on me, but I didn't know that that was any different than what anyone else was experiencing. And maybe it wasn't. I don't know. But I just know that looking back on it, that's what was going on all the time. And we fixed that problem. In my early teenage years, we fixed that problem. We used alcohol. Alcohol fixed that problem very quickly. And at the time that I first drank my thoughts on it were, wow, this is really fun. And there were some consequences early on, but they weren't that bad. But nothing like they were going to be later. But I just remember thinking, this is so much fun. Now, here's what I understand today. Today, I understand that it's not that the alcohol was fun. It's that life is fun. But I couldn't experience life because I was so caught up in this stream of negativity in my head that I couldn't experience life out here. Well, alcohol gave me relief from that. And what it allowed me to do was experience the joy of life that's available for all of us. Now, if you listen to very many AA speakers, you're going to hear something similar to that from almost every one of them. We were really uncomfortable, and then we drank, and things got a lot better. But the interesting thing is that's not what makes me alcoholic. I taught high school for 15 years, and I worked with many teenagers. And what I just described is a common experience among teenagers. They're very uncomfortable. They get some kind of chemicals in their system, and they feel better. Are they all alcoholic? Some of them are, but not all of them. Thank God they're not all alcoholic, because I don't know if the fellowship can handle them all at once. So then if that's not what makes me alcoholic, then what is? And it's real simple, and I'm just going to briefly describe it. For me, what it looked like is I at some point developed an alcohol problem. And what I mean by that is once I started to drink, a craving hit me that made that where it became more important than anything else. So if my marriage was standing in the way of my drinking, then the marriage was put on the back burner, or it had to go. If my job stood in the way of my drinking, it had to go. Whatever it was, everything in my life that kept me from drinking, I was going to have to go through or around or run away from, or whatever it is, because once I started, that became the most important thing. And you know, that's a very, as you all know, that's doesn't even touch the reality of the suffering caused by that problem. You know, where drinking becomes more important than my daughter, or where drinking becomes more important than my physical health, or more important than so many of these things that should be the most important things in our lives. If they stood in the way of drinking, they had to go. And that was my experience over and over and over. What I looked like as a father and a husband is I would leave the house for 20 minutes and come back in 2 weeks on a regular basis, because somewhere in that 20 minutes, I'd pick up a drink, and then all bets are off. And I keep meaning to go home, but now's not the time. We'll deal with that later today, or we'll deal with that tomorrow, or whatever. And it seemed like I just kept changing my mind to stay out a little bit longer. Okay, so then once I began to suffer those consequences, I did what we all do. I quit drinking. Obviously, the drinking is a problem, and I got to put it down. I quit. You know, and just to tell you a quick story, you know, I had a bad wreck a few years before I got sober, and spent a long time in the hospital and had some surgeries and broken bones. I came home with a broken hip and shoulder and jaw, and I looked my big dysfunctional family, you know, they showed up for me. I'd pushed them out of my lives, but they showed up for me. And I looked people in the eye and I said, man, I'm done drinking. This has gotten way out of hand. No more partying. I'm going to straighten up, fulfill my potential, be a father, be a husband, be all the things that go back to school, do all those things. And I lasted 2 days. 2 days on a walker with my jaws wired shut. I'm staying out all night drinking and partying again. And that began the years of quitting drinking. I quit and start back and quit and start back and quit and start back. And considering the consequences that I suffered and that I put the people that were unfortunate enough to love me through, that's insanity. And when it comes to drinking, I'm crazy. And that's what makes me alcoholic. And what do I mean by I'm crazy? I don't mean the crazy things that I do when I drink. I mean this one crazy thing that I do, the craziest thing I've ever done. And I've done some crazy things. I've done some really crazy things, and I wish we had more time, and I'd love to tell some of those stories. But the craziest thing I ever did was pick up that first drink. And there's my true insanity. and what I didn't know at that time, but what I understand today is I suffer from an illness which is hopeless because I suffer terrible consequences when I drink and I can't not pick up the first drink. I have no power to do that. So what happened for me is I went to a treatment center. They got me hooked up in AA. I don't know what they did besides that, but they introduced me to AA and they told me to go to a lot of meetings. And that's what I did. I got very involved. I showed up early, stayed late, hung out with the group members, chaired meetings. I was on all the committees. I did all that stuff. I really wanted to quit drinking, and I stayed sober and I stayed crazy in all those other respects. I was sick, very sick. And between 6 months and a year into that, I was about ready to leave AA. Two reasons. Number one, I didn't like it anymore. And number two, I didn't think I needed it. And I met a guy. And this guy set me down after the meeting. And he was actually from out of town. I was going to give him a few minutes before I went and met my friends to kind of welcome him to the group or whatever. And that few minutes turned into a couple hours. And what he did is he 12-stepped me well into sobriety. And he helped me to understand that my sobriety was not guaranteed. As a matter of fact, I was in a really risky place. As he helped me to understand that I was probably not going to stay sober a year for the rest of this, my first year of sobriety. And it was a very disturbing conversation. He helped me to understand that my thinking was of no value to me when it comes to my alcoholism. And after he had me so disturbed, he said, Chad, I think I know what you need. And I was like, what? What do I need? And he said, you need a spiritual awakening as a result of the 12 steps. And I was like, oh, that's what these weirdos have been talking about in these meetings. They didn't stay at my home group very long, but I would hear them talking about that. And I didn't think it applied to me. I got into working the steps with this guy, had an incredible experience. And then I moved down to Austin and I met Charlie and Katie and got involved in the primary purpose group. And in that process, I fell in love with the big book. And that for me didn't happen until about 4 or 5 years of sobriety. Up until that point, I had done the steps, but done them in a different way. And it wasn't very efficient. Took a long time. I wasn't really having any luck sponsoring anybody. I might have 1 or 2 guys or none. And there was a lot that I didn't understand in that process. But when I got to Austin and got into this big book, involved with the primary purpose group, hearing this stuff from Charlie and Katie and Mark Houston, if any of you guys don't have any experience with Mark Houston, I highly recommend that you get a hold of some of his talks. You can find them anywhere, anywhere you can find speakers, you can find something by him. And it completely changed my sponsor's life. It changed my life and it had such an effect on the whole pocket of enthusiasm that I came up in the Austin area. So what did I learn there about these steps? A big one that I want to briefly touch on before we get into 6 and 7 is the third step, because I was just talking on the phone with someone asking me about this third step with newcomers. And I was like, you can call it the third step, but the third step doesn't really happen until 6 and 7. That's when it really happens, but what's this third step about? And the way it was first described to me is it's just a prayer. It's funny. Charlie and Katie and I were at a conference, and Katie was the speaker. I was doing a panel on 8 and 9. Charlie was doing a panel on the third step. And we were sharing our time with some other speakers, some people we didn't know. And we overheard someone that was on the panel with Charlie say, wow, I'm supposed to do 10 minutes on the third step. What are you supposed to say in 10 minutes? It's just a prayer. And I think that's the kind of understanding that I had, and the understanding that I have today is if you want me to do a talk on the third step, I'm going to need a lot of time, because there's a lot going on here on pages 60, 61, and 62. But if you're not studying the big book, you might miss that. So what is it that's so important that I learned about the third step? Well, here it is. I have an illness that's killing me, and I can't do anything about it. the only solution is a spiritual awakening. Well, when I come to the third step, what I find out is that I can't have one of those. And why can't I have a spiritual awakening? Well, because I'm blocked. And what's blocking me? Well, what's blocking me is my effort to live on self-will. I'm playing God and then hoping to have an experience with God. And what I've discovered is that doesn't really happen. It can't really happen. The only way I can experience God is to lower self. As self-will falls away, God consciousness rises. And that's really the only shot that I have. So what is it that I'm doing? Well, I'm trying to arrange life to suit me. I've got a very sick relationship with life. As a matter of fact, I really don't even have a relationship with life. What I have is a relationship with how I think life should be. It's not just that I have some preferences on I'd rather drive a new pickup truck than a new sports car or things like that. No, it's not that. It's that I'm obsessed with how I think life should be. That's all I ever think about. I think about how you need to be, and if you can't be that way, I don't want you in my life. I only want the people there that are going to be the way that I need them to be for me to be okay. I need to be who I need to be okay. The book briefly touches on this idea of stage characters. And you know what I do? I create in my mind who it is that I need to be. And then I create an entire set of beliefs to fit in with that. You know, for instance, I may decide that I am a Republican or a Democrat. And so what I do then is I go along with an entire set of beliefs on how I need to show up and how I need to see the world so that I am who I think I need to be okay. I love how Ram Dass talks about being somebody. I spend my whole life trying to be somebody. Spiritual growth is to become nobody, to let go of those stage characters, to stop trying to arrange life to suit me, to stop trying to arrange you to suit me, to stop trying to do all this. And I don't know how to do that, man. It's all I've ever known to do. So the book goes on to tell me that above everything, I must be free of this selfishness and self-centeredness. Above everything. It doesn't say above everything I need to quit drinking. It doesn't say above everything I need to find God. It says above everything, I got to be free of this self. And that's the reason. As self falls away, as I get free of it, I begin to have an experience with a God that in my case, I never even believed in the first place. But that doesn't matter because we're about having an experience, not a belief. The belief is a step to move me into having an experience. And that's what we're trying to do here. And that's why this is so important. So as self falls away, God consciousness naturally goes up, because it turns out as a human being, my natural state is to live in a place where I'm conscious of the presence of God in me, in you, all around me. That's what I was born into. And then because I've spent my entire, somewhere along the way, I told my mind, I said, mind, here's what I need you to do. I need you to arrange my life so that I never have to experience any discomfort or inconvenience or, God forbid, any pain. And that's what it's been. And guess what? My mind's not qualified. So it's in high gear all the time, trying to figure that out. You know what will slow it down? Alcohol. Alcohol will really slow it down. But I'm not that successful when it comes to drinking. We've already talked about that. So I got to have something else. I can't live this way. So then when we move from that third step where we're introduced to this, pages 60, 61, and 62 are so important because they introduce me to the failure of self-will. And there's the big problem, because that's what's keeping me from having the spiritual awakening, which is the only solution to my alcoholism. And it turns out it's also the only thing that can bring me real happiness in this life. So that's the good news. Not only is it going to keep me sober, that's just a byproduct, but it's going to give me the freedom and the peace to walk through this life and enjoy it and experience it in all that it is. Then we move into to step 4, where we begin to look at manifestations of self. So we've talked about everybody on pages 60, 61, 62. Now I'm really going to start looking at me. What are these manifestations of self and how do they show up? And I put this stuff on paper, then I read it to somebody. I admit it to myself, then I admit it to another person. So I sit down and I really take a hard look at this. And I come out of that fifth step with what the book refers to as the exact nature of my wrongs. What is it that's been generating these resentments? What's been generating these fears? What's been causing me to fail in this life? What's been causing the failure of self-will in my life? And now I have some of that stuff as I'm moving in here. So then on page 75, it tells me, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. The first time I did this, I was like, I've been sober a while. I don't have to do an hour, do I? What am I going to do in an hour? That's a long time. And I think a lot of us have that experience, a whole hour. Come on. There's like two paragraphs in a prayer in an hour. What are we supposed to do? And the way I see that hour, and actually, I did it a couple times before I really felt like I had something to do for that entire hour. And it was interesting. Mark Houston had a talk with us at Charlie's table one time and really opened my eyes to a lot of things here. And I'm going to try to share some of that with you guys. As a matter of fact, I kind of made up a deal for it for our book study at Primary Purpose Group that I can actually send to somebody. If we put my email address in the chat and you want it, I'll send it to you. Let's see here if I can find it. That kind of is something that Mark talked about during this hour. But anyway, so what is this? It's a meditation. So this hour is a form of meditation. And the way meditation was looked at when this book was written, there wasn't so much Eastern influence on it. It wasn't today. What most people see as meditation is sitting still with your eyes closed, maybe focusing on your breath and trying to clear your mind, or something similar to that. But when this book was written, meditation meant something a little different, something more like maybe contemplation or reflection, or in the 11th step, it's the meditation they're referring to there can have something to do with preparing for the day. But those are all, prayer can be a form of meditation when you contemplate and consider a prayer. So there are different forms of it, but that's what this is. It's a meditation where I'm going to reflect on what I've done. And I'm going to contemplate and consider the exact nature of my wrongs, or maybe this list of character defects that I'm bringing into this. So it says we review what we have done. I'm looking back over this stuff. And then it's interesting. It takes me straight into gratitude. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better, because hopefully if I've shared it all in this fifth step, everything that I'm aware of, I haven't held anything back. What's happened is I've gained some humility, some surrender. And as I've gained some of this surrender, my God consciousness has gone up. So when it says we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better, it doesn't say that we know more about Him, because we haven't been sitting down talking about God. It's that we know God better from here, from my heart. I know I'm having an experience with God as I've done some surrendering in this fifth step. And there's some real gratitude in that. And it's an interesting thing, because if you just kind of read this and you know what's going on, and you're like, so you're telling me we're going to spend 3 hours talking about how resentful I am and how selfish I am and how full of fear I am and how all these things that I've been blaming on other people are really caused by me, and I'm going to be thankful for that? But that's why. It's not that I've learned a lot of information to make me say, wow, thank you for all that information. No, it's not the information that I'm grateful for. It's the experience that I'm grateful for. And that's where some of these promises above this come from. So then it goes on to talk about these proposals. It says, turn to the page which contains the 12 steps, look at these first 5 proposals and ask if we've omitted anything. And that's where Mark went so deep with this, where he talked about what we're bringing into the 6th step. As I look at these first 5 steps, what is it that I'm bringing into the 6th step? Well, Oh, that's not what I wanted. I've got something here that I like to share with people, and I can't find it. That's okay. Maybe I'm not supposed to. So what I'm bringing to the sixth step is this problem that I have with alcohol, that once I start to drink, it becomes more important than anything else in my life. My efforts to stop, that I'm not able to stop, that I am insane when it comes to the first drink, that I've got this hopeless condition, that my only alternatives are to either die an alcoholic death or live on a spiritual basis. Am I clear on that? Can I bring that into the sixth step? Do I understand that my life run on my will is a failure? That I'm like an actor trying to run the whole show? That I'm a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? That I'm a victim of the delusion that if I can just get what I want out of this life, I'll be okay? That's delusional, that never works for me, that my troubles are of my own making. Can I bring that into 6 and 7? All these resentments, these fears, the self-seeking thoughts and actions that I engage in on a regular basis, can I bring this into 6 and 7? All these secrets, these are the things that I'm bringing in, and I can go back through and consider, contemplate all these things. Make sure that I haven't omitted anything. And then it gives these references here. And it's interesting, these stones in place, the foundation of willingness on page 12, and the cornerstone of belief or willingness to believe on page 47, the keystone on page 62, the cement. It talks about the cement that binds us together on page 17. So those are some references you can go back and look at. So now if I can answer these questions to my satisfaction, now I'm moving into the sixth step. And this is where this gets really interesting. And, when I was first introduced to this step, I was told that the big book didn't have enough on it, that we were going to have to use the 12 and 12. And that's good stuff, but I can tell you, I don't use it today. I take guys through the steps straight out of the big book. I think it's a good piece of literature, and there are other really good pieces of literature that can be helpful. But in my opinion and my experience, when I take someone through the steps, this is all we need right here, because we're about to really take the third step. I think it's Mike L. who says, I was asked not to use last names here. So far, Mark Houston, he's not with us anymore. That's the only one I've used. I'm doing good. Mike L., I think, is the guy who said, now this is 6 and 7. Now this is the third step with teeth. Because now I see me. I see how I show up. I see what my character defects are, the exact nature of my wrongs. I see what's blocking me, and I'm clear on that. I'm moving into this with a new level of awareness. I'm also moving into it with a new level of willingness. I think back to how AA came together with 3 things: an understanding of the problem, an understanding of the solution, and a program of action on how to get there. Well, when Bill met Dr. Bob already knew the solution, and he knew the program of action. But when Bill first identified with Bob, so Bob knew he was talking to a real alcoholic, and then Bill explained the problem, Dr. Bob went about this program of action to get this solution with a new willingness. And that's what we're doing here. Now we're going to take the third step in 6 and 7 with an entirely new willingness, because it's not just something I've read on pages 60 to 62. It's something I have put on paper myself, and I've presented to another person who's helped me to see where I'm falling short and see what's really blocking me. So not only do I have a new level of awareness, but that new awareness has brought on a whole new level of willingness. And, if you notice, check out, if you've never done this, put the third step prayer right next to the 7th step prayer. And read them to, and it's a little bit out of order, but it's almost the exact same thing. If you take one of them and move some of the lines around, it's basically the same prayer, just with a little bit of different words. So now this new, and it tells me this right off the bat. It says, we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Well, that's where this new willingness comes from, is I'm walking out of 4 and 5 going, oh my God, I've got some serious work to do. And I don't know about you guys, so we're all different when we come in here, but I really thought if you get the alcohol off me, I'll be fine. You know, I really believed that. And after doing this, it's like, oh no, no, I am not fine. You know, and the longer I stay sober, the more I see like I'm about to have 20 years. And I think back to when I picked up my 5-year chip, and I was at a meeting, and I was one of those who really I still do, put on a really good front in the meeting. And I get accolades in AA, you know, and the longer I stay sober, the more I realize that they're not bringing me the happiness that I was hoping for. You know, it's still an inside job, but I was getting accolades there when it was my birthday, and I got my 5 years, you know, and my grand sponsor was a grumpy old guy full of love, you know, one of those AAs that's real grumpy on the surface, but you get to know him and he just is full of love. But he, after the meeting, he said, now, how long do you have now? And I said, 5 years. And he said, wow, I thought you'd be further along by now. And that's exactly how I feel right now, going in my 20th year of sobriety. A lot of times when I'm doing a review and I'm discussing a 10-step and I'm looking at what's going on in here, I'm like, wow, I thought that at this point in my sobriety, I would be so much further. I didn't think I'd still have all this stuff, you know, but yeah, I definitely do. So it's been an ongoing process, but every time that I do this, do some inventory or go through some kind of body of work in this deal, it's like, it's a new level of willingness to carry on with steps 10 and 11 and to make these amends and to do this stuff, you know? And so, and it's also the thing, I think, that sends some of us out the door. I mean, the Austin area is full of big book thumpers, man. I mean, I'm not talking about, you know, I'm a big book guy and I come straight out of the big book. But I'm talking about the guy with 6 months that's pounding this book, talking about things that he doesn't have much experience with. And I love that guy. I love that guy. I was that guy, but with a little more time. But you know, what happens sometimes that I see that's so sad is that guy may stay sober a long time, but he might not. And I think what happens is somewhere, he may not even know this is happening, but somewhere it gets too uncomfortable. He gets in a relationship and starts to experience character defects that he had no idea that he had. Because for most of us, we have certain defects when we're drinking, and those are the first ones we look at. Yeah, we lie all the time and we steal and we cheat, and those obvious ones. But then as we move more and more into sobriety and we're acting right in front of you guys, we start to experience these deeper defects, and they're troubling. It's hard to look at this stuff, you know, and I love it that we have people in AA. You know, Charlie and Katie were always so good about this, and they taught me really share the darkness, you know, and I've seen them catch heat, especially Katie. I've seen it with my own eyes at conferences and things where people come up to her and are critical of her because of some of the things she shared from the podium, you know, some of the thoughts that she might have had or whatever. But I think most of us really need that. We need to see that we're not different, and that not only are there people out there who drank the way that we drank who are staying sober, but there are people that have had those same kind of dark thoughts and dark behaviors that we've had in sobriety who have moved through that. And we need to know that stuff. So that's one of the things I love about AA is how transparent we are with each other to know that we can move through this. Because really what we do in AA is we use the darkness in here to grow. We have to shine a light on it to grow, because if we don't, we don't stay, you know, so we really got to do that. And I have experience with that. I know that stuff from experience. So then we move into, now we've got these character defects. And my first few years in AA, I would hear people in a meeting on 6 and 7 always talk about working on their defects, you know, and working on my character defects. And great, work on them just so you can see that it doesn't work. You know, I even heard a guy in a meeting one time say, yeah, man, my sponsor, when I was new, we had this list of defects and I had to cut them all into pieces and put them in a hat. And then each day I would pull one out. And that was the one I was going to work on today. I was going to work on this character defect and make sure that I acted in the opposite way. And then he finds out that he can't do it, you know, and he's talking, this is not working, man. These character defects are getting worse. And his sponsor says, exactly. That's what I want you to see, is you are powerless over these character defects. And that's why we're moving into this. Because if you could do something about it, you would have already done it in most cases, you know. So now, like Charlie says to me all the time, it sounds like you've got a serious piece of business with God. And that's what happens for me over and over with these. And it tells me in the third step, you know, there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. You know, God makes it possible. And for those that want to be a little bit more practical minded like I do, don't worry. We have steps that we take that place us in a position to be changed, you know. So this step is not about working on my defects. It's about surrender. The work happens in steps 4, 5, 8, 9, 10, and 11, not in 6 and 7. I do all these things so that I can surrender. It's my job to become aware and to surrender. God's job to remove the defects. And God does his job really, really well. The trouble is in my willingness and ability to surrender. That's where the struggles come from. See, I've got these things within me that block me. They block this flow of God consciousness. They're old ideas, belief systems, fears, resentments, things that have happened to me in the past or that I've done in the past or whatever it is. And I haven't, it's like I haven't let these experiences pass through. I've held them inside and they're blocking this flow through me. So it's these blockages that I've got to get free of. I'm running on programs that I'm asleep to. We talk about how faulty our thinking is, and I don't really think that's the problem. If I acted according to my thinking all the time, I would do pretty good, but I don't. A lot of times I'm acting based on programs that are running in the background because I'm thinking about something else and I'm acting out. I'm like, God, I can't believe I did that again. If I made a list of the way I wanted to show up and I could actually show up that way all the time based on what I think would be good, man, I could do really well. The problem is these programs are running about 95% of my decisions. And I'm basically thinking, feeling, and behaving the same way I did yesterday and the day before and the day before. And I get stuck in some of this stuff. So that creates this powerlessness. It's like I don't know if it's happening in the subconscious or what it is, but there's something within me that seems to be running my life. And it's me. It's just not always my thinking mind. And it's certainly not God, because God's not going to run this thing unless I'm willing to surrender to it. And that's and you know, we all want our lives to change, but do we really want to change? Because the only way my life can change is if I change. And change is uncomfortable. See, what I've done is I've set up a life where I don't have to experience that discomfort, and I have tools that I use to arrange it. And those tools are my character defects. You know, so many of these things that I think are these terrible problems that I need to get rid of, it turns out they're not really problems. They're really my answers. And that's what makes this stuff so tricky. I'll give you an example. This lying, this dishonesty that I have is ruining relationships in my life. And I don't want ruined relationships. But sometimes I do things that are going to get me in trouble, and I need to lie about it. Or I'm very afraid to show you who I really am, so I can't be transparent. I've got to try to be somebody I'm not. Maybe I got to tell stories that are not entirely true. Whatever it is that I'm doing, but this dishonesty is a real problem, but it's also something that I need in order to be able to operate in this life. I'll give you an example for me from a few years ago. I was in a difficult relationship where we pushed each other. We're still together today, but we don't do this anymore. We've really gotten free of this. But in the early years, we fought like crazy. I pushed her buttons, she pushed mine. You know, if you want to put it in therapeutic terms, because we went to counseling, we triggered each other a lot, you know, and me blowing up wasn't her fault. It's my stuff within me. She just pushed the little buttons, but it's my responsibility that I have these buttons, right? And same vice versa. So we would fight a lot. Well, when it got real uncomfortable, I knew how to end the fight. I could yell. I'm a lot bigger than she is. I could throw something across the room. I could bang my hand on the table. I could break something, and that would end it, you know? And it was ruining my relationship, and it was totally robbing my peace of mind, and it was scaring the hell out of her, you know? And I didn't want to do it anymore. But what I didn't understand is that I needed it, because the alternative was to stay calm and listen and actually walk through what are very difficult situations, and to listen to these opinions that she had that I so strongly disagreed with, you know. So I needed this. So sometimes these things that we call character defects, well, really, the book says, am I ready? It says, am I now ready to let God remove from me all these things which I have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? Well, no, I need that. Here's what I need for you to do, God. I need for you to remove the consequences, and then let me take it from here. So really what it comes down to is, are we talking about, I want to know how to manage these character defects, or I want to surrender them? Manage versus surrender. And if that sounds like the same problem I have with drinking, that's because it is. It's the same thing I had with drinking. In step one, I had to surrender two things: my effort to manage my drinking and my efforts to stop on my own power. In step 6, I have to surrender two things: my effort to manage my character defects, and then my efforts to stop acting out on these defects on my own power, because I'm powerless in both senses. And that's what I'm faced with here, moving into this 7th step. So the question then is, what do I really want? Do I want to stop suffering consequences, or do I want freedom? Do I want to really develop a relationship with God? I quit smoking cigarettes when I had 18 months. And I went to my sponsor, and I knew that he had quit. And I had been trying to quit for a long time. I tried all kinds of different things, you know, to quit. Like I would give my roommate $5 so I could bum 3 cigarettes a day. Or, you know, I had these, I threw away, I don't know how many packs I threw away that had 19 cigarettes in them, because I was, you know, I was trying so hard. And he said to me, he said, you know, when I quit smoking, I made a deal with God. I was like, what do you mean you made a deal with God? He said, well, here's the deal. The deal with God was this: I won't pick up another cigarette, God, if you'll make sure I'm okay without them. Well, that's an interesting approach to character defects. Because when I get to this point, I go, okay, you know what? The dishonesty has become objectionable. It's really ruining relationships. Here's the deal, God. I'll start telling the truth. I'll start being who I really am, if you'll make sure I'm okay without the dishonesty. God, I will stop blowing up if you'll make sure that I'm okay sitting down and facing some of these difficult issues. You know, for me, it came down to, I had to completely surrender the idea of changing her mind. No matter what, I was going to do nothing to change her mind. Even if what she was saying, I felt like was completely off base and it said terrible things about me, I would make no effort to change her mind, period. And that's the commitment that I made. Now, that wasn't the end of it. I had more work to do. in steps 8 and 9, in step 10, step 11. I had more stuff that I had to do in order to uphold that commitment. But when I really realized that that's what I was really surrendering, everything changed. And now I knew what the work was, because up until that point, I had been using step 9, step 10, step 11 to help manage my character defect. And now I was using these steps to help me surrender and allow God to remove the defect. And that's a completely different story. And that's just one example of many that I've gone through here. So what I'm faced with, just like with the drinking, is the dilemma. I can't live with them, and I can't live without them. And that's where God comes in. Charlie has me work with 4 questions. The 4 questions that I work with, and again, I'm going to try to stick my email address in the chat here. And if anybody wants that or that thing on the 5th step, I'll send it to you. The 4 questions we work with. Number 1, what is it that's objectionable? And when I have guys do this, the way that I do this is and if you do this a different way, I'm not telling you you're doing it wrong. But the way that we do it is I go into step 6 with specific defects based on the inventory. For instance, I'm not going in with self-pity as a defect. I'm going in with, I go into self-pity in this certain situation so that I don't have to do anything about it. Or I'm not going to say that I go in, I'm not going into step 6 with anger. I'm going into step 6 with, I use rage to shut down an argument with my girlfriend. That's the kind of character defect that I'm trying to bring in here, because I can see it in my life very clearly. I can see where it is, and I know exactly what it is that I want to get free of. That's the way I do it today. If I do this talk on 6 and 7 a few years from now, I may do it completely different, but that's what I'm doing now. So then these 4 questions. What is it that's objectionable? That's the first question. Second question, can I fix it on my own power? And that's a consideration more than a question. Can I fix this on my own power? Look at my experience, not my thinking. Because my thinking will always tell me, yes, Chad, you can fix this. Look at my experience. If I'm an outsider following me around everywhere, does it look like I can fix it on my own power? No. Brings me right into the third question. Am I willing to let God change me in however he sees fit? And if I have answered a strong no to that second question, that third question becomes much more inviting. Then the 7th step prayer comes in. And then that last question is, how can I align myself with the process? So I'm going to give you a quick example of that one. I based on a guy I've done some work with who told me that I could use this example. So he read me fear inventory that his girlfriend was cheating on him. Okay. And then after we were done with the inventory, and he gets to this last question, and he takes these questions to God. These are questions that he takes to God and takes pen and paper and kind of sits with God, does some two-way prayer. If you're not familiar with what that is, there's a website called twowayprayer.org. It's spelled out TWO, twowayprayer.org. It's a practice early AAs were using from the Oxford group. Check it out if you've never looked at it. It's really cool. So he's using that, and here's what he gets from this last question. How can I align myself with the process? Very clearly, what God says to him is, stop making fake social media accounts and stalking her to see if there are any guys liking her posts. And it makes perfect sense. How are you supposed to get free of fear when you're acting in that kind of self-will? But that brings you to the next thing. Oh, no, God, that's going too far. I've got to do that to make sure. And God's saying, do you trust me or not? And it's not, do you trust that I'm going to make sure she's not going to cheat on you? It's, do you trust that you're going to be okay if you stay close to me, regardless of what happens. And that's what it always comes down to. Do you trust that you're going to be okay if you stay close to me? And if the answer is yes, well, then go help somebody. And I'll handle this problem. When we move into this 7-step prayer, it's a commitment. It's a commitment that I'm making on something I don't know how to do. And what is that commitment? Well, that commitment is to stop acting in these defects. I don't know how to do it, but that's the commitment that I'm making. And thank God we don't end at step 7. We've got more steps to carry us through this process that are going to show us how to do this. Because this brings real depth to steps 10 and 11. Of course, I go make the amends based on these character defects. And now I know what to make amends for. I'm much more clear on that. But now I know what I'm looking for in step 10. I know what I'm looking for in that review. I know what to pray for in my morning prayer and meditation because I know my defects. Part of a spiritual awakening is waking up to my character defects, waking up to how I show up, staying aware of that. So now I'm ready. I've got some real depth there. So I make this commitment. If I can tell that story. I'll tell it real quick. So I was doing some therapy years ago. I met with this therapist 3 times and we did all the family history stuff. And I want to throw in, every time I talk about this, I want to make it clear that therapy is a great thing for alcoholics and drug addicts and Al-Anons and anybody to do, in my opinion, if you do it in addition to the 12 steps, not instead of. It was a great supplement to my AA program. I met with her 3 times in the summer when I was teaching down in South Austin. We got the family history all done. She said, Chad, I think I can help you. So will you commit to do this work with me? And I said, well, I'd like to, but I don't think I can make it down here because I'm about to start back. So the school year is going to start. And she said, well, no, I'm not trying to figure that out yet. I just need to know, will you commit to doing this work? I said, no, I don't think you understand. See, I work 5 days a week and you're only open in 3 afternoons a week, and it's an hour-and-a-half drive. I can't. And she said, Chad, stop right there. I told you I'm not asking you to figure it out. I'm asking you to make a commitment. And I said, okay, I commit to doing this work with you. And she said, okay, great. Now God will open a door. Isn't that a nice therapist, to say something like that? And you know what? God opened a door, and I ended up doing 2 years of this, and it really helped me with my daughter and some other situations. The point is, this 7-step prayer, like the 3rd-step prayer, is a commitment to do something I don't know how to do, and I don't even really believe it's going to work. But I make the commitment, God opens the door. And that's why we're so grateful that the steps don't end there. So the goal here, the goal is to continue to grow. Has anybody had an experience where your spiritual growth in AA has been messy? Anybody had that experience? Good. I just want to make sure somebody out there is still listening. Yeah. Good. Yeah, it's messy. It's really messy and it's hard. It's hard to face this stuff, but it's grow or go. We made a deal in the 3rd step, and that deal was this. I'm going to stay close to God and do God's work, and God's going to give me what I need. I thought it was all good stuff that I needed, but here's what I didn't know. God giving me what I need in a lot of cases is what I need for the next phase of my spiritual development. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable. And I don't know if God's giving it to me or I'm attracting it into my life, but either way, it's difficult and it's messy sometimes. But that's what we continue to do in AA. And I'll tell you what, man, I love adventure. I love to hike and camp and climb rocks and all those kind of things. And the thing I love about AA is it's the adventure of spiritual growth. It's a big spiritual adventure, and I don't want to miss it. Guys, thanks for having me.